You've probably watched hundreds of guitar tutorials, but somehow your sound is still shit and not sounding anything close like the professionals you love so much. Most of the time, this is not a talent or equipment issue, it's coming down to production. And this is something that no plugin can fix, but luckily, if you get this right, you are guaranteed to have a perfect sound every time. I'm Tom, a metal producer, and in this video I wanted to cover some guitar production tips that every producer should know to get the best sound possible. Let's begin with the first step where it actually matters the most, the DI. Everything starts here, and you need to remember this very important sentence: garbage in, garbage out. If your DI doesn't sound absolutely incredible, then everything that comes after that is not going to be as good. First thing you need to pay attention to is to commit to the gain level. This is the sound that comes from your guitar to the audio interface and from there directly into the DAW. I see so many people slam way too much gain on their signal, and what happens is that it squashes into a wall of clipped audio that sounds like shit, and no plugin can fix that. Watch the audio interface while you're playing, dial the gain accordingly, watch how it reacts in the DAW, and then continue from there. Ideally, it needs to be somewhere between -6 and -12, but if it goes a little bit above or under, don't worry about it. Second thing you need to make sure is that your tuning is right, no matter which part you're playing. It's very much recommended to check your guitar tuning around every 10 minutes or whenever you're playing in a different fret. Hold your hands in the right position, pluck the string and see how it reacts. Because of the physics of the strings, whenever you pluck, the tune is getting a bit sharper than usual, so make sure to tune according to that. It's time consuming, but it's much easier to fix before than after, trust me on this. And third, if you record an amp also, make sure to use a DI pedal and split your signals to send a clean DI sound into the audio interface and not record only the amp itself. This will give you much better options to change the sound later if necessary, and if you make any mistakes or want to test some effects, fixing a DI is much easier than an actual amp. Now that you have the DI all set, let's go to the next step, and that is shape your tone at its source. Don't leave it for later. Low frequencies in the guitars not only get clashed with the bass and the kick, but also whenever you're palm muting or playing really loud, they get a little bit out of control. Because a boomy signal is going to be boomy and distorted once it gets through an amp. Using a dynamic low shelf on the lower frequencies and adding a boost pedal before the amp tightens everything up, and it lets you run much more gain with much less mushy sound. This is one of the main reasons you see guitarists using an overdrive pedal right before it goes into the amp. This kind of saturation, when used lightly, is very good with maintaining the low frequencies at a very good range and not letting everything go out of control. And also use your ears with how much are you decreasing. You need to remember that your guitar shines in the mid frequencies while the bass is in the lower ones. So always make sure to leave enough room for the bass. I usually put a low shelf at around 100 Hz and using the dynamics function whenever I'm playing and it's getting a little bit too loud in the lower frequencies. While you're recording your guitar, and especially if you're using real amps, you need to remember that room usually kills your clarity, especially with fast, low riffs. If you're recording an amp, make sure there's not too much room going into the microphone. And if you love using reverbs, then you need to remember that on lower frequencies it usually doesn't translate too well because the bass sound waves tend to move in a much different and more aggressive way that stays for longer than higher frequencies. Having room in your sound is taking away from the guitar's clarity, especially when you play fast and low tones. You can also use them on slow-paced riffs if you want to make them sound a little bit more epic. Just make sure to EQ the reverb with the low frequencies scooped, and you can be quite aggressive with it. Now let's go to the actual playing, and the first thing that I find to be the most helpful for guitarists is to make sure you get the sound as close as possible to the end result. This will make you play better, and it's a trick I like to use based on working with many vocalists. Just like a singer improves their performances when you add a bit of reverb, delay, compression and EQ directly to their vocal chain while they're recording, making the guitar sound well will make you play better as well. The mix doesn't have to be perfect at this stage, but getting as close as possible to the end result that you want to get is going to give you better results, because the most important thing to remember that your playing comes from feeling and not from technique, and getting that sound is a huge impact. If you want to play loud and aggressive, then make sure to reduce the volume a little bit, because this will make you play louder. And if you want to feel something incredible while you're playing a solo, put some more reverb and delay and see how much it affects the way you're playing. And if we're talking about solos and feelings, you need to also remember that muting is king. Every time you strum a string, that vibration runs through the whole body of the guitar and shakes every other string with it. While not being such a huge problem with clean tones, when you're using high gains, it's piercing through much more, because the gain and distortion amplifying everything, including the string you're not even touching. So the way to control it is, first, practice your picking hand and make sure that you're muting the strings that you're currently not playing with. And if you're playing something a bit more complicated, like a solo, sweep, where you can't quite focus on anything else but playing it as good as possible, you can use a fret wrap to dampen the strings that are currently not being used. When you're playing a solo, you've put a fret wrap behind your playing hand, and this is dampening all the strings that are not supposed to be active. And don't stress if you don't have a fret wrap. You can use a scrunchie, a sock, anything that kills vibration works. I personally love to use the soft side of cable wrappers because it lets me control exactly which strings I'm muting for each recording. It's cheap as fuck and doing wonders in the recording studio. Now that we actually get in the groove, you need to remember not to obsess too much about long parts and playing them perfect. Even the best players in the world are making mistakes in the studio, and nobody is nailing a whole section perfectly every single time. What it actually costs you is time, because chasing one perfect full take is the most expensive way to spend the session. So instead, record the part a few times, grab the best pieces from each take, punch in for the final polish whenever you need it, then handle all the time stretching and pitch shifting whenever necessary. And also, I know how fun it is to get stuck in a perfect loop and trying to improve that, but you need to remember that if your whole song is not complete and you're focusing on just one part, you're really ruining your chances of finishing this stuff. There are so many professional musicians making so many mistakes while recording the songs, and re-recording specific parts that went wrong is absolutely okay. It's not gonna make you a worse guitarist. But if you do make a mistake, let's go to the next tip, which is how to correctly punch in. Let's say you need a new take on a section. What most people do is taking 4 counts back and hit record right when the part starts. The problem is that playing exactly where you're supposed to begin can sound a bit fake, and in the past I used to make it a lot, and even crossfade couldn't save it. So what you do in this case is take around a bar and a half before you start recording and start playing a little bit before the actual part you need. Don't worry about nailing the lead in because it's not supposed to come into the final recording anyway. What actually matters is those couple of milliseconds right before your punch in. Add crossfade and boom, no one will ever hear it. Now that you recorded your part, let's talk about single, double and quad tracking and how exactly is it working. Double tracking is the bare minimum you need to make a guitar sound good, and unless you've been living under a rock, you should know that for a good riff, you need to record the guitar part twice and not just copy paste it, because then you take one mono track and duplicating it from side to side. It's going to sound exactly the same and not do the work you need. It's all those differences in the sound waves that are going to make it sound much wider than usual. So record 2 real performances, hard pan them left and right, and change something between them. You can use a different amp sim, different IR, even a different guitar if you have it. And if you want to make your guitar sound even larger, you can do quad recordings. That means that you're recording the same riffs again 2 more times and panning them hard left and hard right. But I'm not a huge fan of this thing. And the reason for that is that the differences between 2 and 4 guitars are not that big to justify all the precious time you need to record guitars again. Instead, what I love to do, and you can easily implement that, is to play the same riff but different. Play a harmony. Single low notes. Full chords. A lick. I want you to really think what is missing and what you can use to make the sound work better. Don't just do something that a random YouTuber said, and that including me. Test and question everything we say to you online, because we all have our different ways of working. If we're talking about making a guitar sound huge, there is a technique that many people have been recommending for a long time, but they haven't really explained why it's really working, and that is dropping your guitar a full octave down to make it sound bigger. This is something pretty known in modern metal productions. You take the guitar, duplicate it, and drop it down a full octave. Many people talk about how it's adding you bass, but you should already have a bass playing. So the one thing I've never heard anyone talking about is that pitch shifting creates very weird warbling and artifacts. Take any instrument and digitally drop it a whole octave down, and it will sound very weird. This sound then running through a guitar amp that isn't really built for such low frequencies, so it's going to create a very interesting twist. So to make it work on your guitar, duplicate the DI, drop it down 12 semitones, process the sound on its own, and then blend it in lower volume under the main tone. You can reduce the bass frequencies quite a bit because you don't want to compete with your bass and kick, and you get a synth-like undertone that gives a really nice push. And finally, if you follow this tutorial and it still didn't work, maybe it's really a gear problem. Single coil, low output, and vintage style pickups are not recommended for metal tones due to their thinner, brighter frequency profile that sounds significantly weaker. They also produce much more noise and hums, and will sound much softer in general. So if you own a vintage Fender or Gibson, be aware that this will make things harder. And if your strings constantly go out of tune, maybe look for a guitar with an Evertune bridge. This keeps your strings under spring corrected tension and keeps them in tune no matter what you do. So hard picking doesn't make your string go any sharper than normal, and you don't need to tune your guitar every couple of takes. I don't have an Evertune unfortunately, but I have played on some guitars with it and it's amazing. A like and subscribe is going to help me convince my wife that this channel is working and it's a good investment, so please help. Sweetie, can I get a new guitar? Nope. And that's technically all the tips you need to know in order to make your guitar sound well during the production phase. So I want to hear your opinion about it. Comment which tricks you probably didn't know or struggled with in the past and how you came over it, and also let me know if I forgot anything important. I could have missed something. And this is going to be a part of a series. I'm also going to talk about drums, about bass, about vocals, everything you need to know in order to make your metal sound like an actual professional song. So until the next time, stay heavy and rock on.